Chapter 1. The Arrangement. The hum of the engine died as David turned the key. He stepped out of his pickup truck, boots crunching the gravel in his driveway, and glanced up at the modest house he'd called home for over a decade. It was quiet, just the way he liked it, until today. Inside, boxes lined the hallway. Some were neatly labeled: books, kitchenware, linens. Others were clearly thrown together last minute. One sat open with socks tangled up in a French press and a cactus. David sighed. He's early. In the kitchen, Marco was crouched in front of the fridge, already arranging his almond milk and oat yogurt with the focus of a man defusing a bomb. His blonde hair curled slightly at the edges, a little messy from the move. He looked up as David stepped inside. "Hey." Marco stood, beaming. "I hope you don't mind. Figured I'd start unpacking. Fridge space is sacred." David grunted. "I said noon." "It's 11:48. Marco flashed a grin. Technically within the window. David wasn't in the mood to argue. He wasn't sure why he'd agreed to this in the first place. Maybe because Marco was the son of an old friend. Maybe because the house was too damn quiet. Or maybe, just maybe, because when Marco had asked if the room was still available, David had hesitated only half a second too long before saying yes. "You find everything you need?" David asked, setting his keys on the counter. Marco nodded. "Yeah, your place is great. The room's bigger than I expected, and that window? Killer light. I might actually be able to grow something for once." David raised an eyebrow. "Just don't kill it and stink up the house." Marco chuckled. "No promises." They stood in silence for a moment. The air wasn't exactly tense, but it wasn't relaxed either. David scratched the back of his neck. "Rules are simple," he said finally. "You take care of your own stuff. No noise after 10, no parties. You handle your rent on the 1st of the month, and stay out of the garage unless you got a reason." Marco gave a mock salute. "Got it, Sergeant." David didn't smile. Marco cleared his throat. "Right. No jokes. Got it." David's gaze lingered a moment longer. Marco wasn't just young, he was bright. Too cheerful, too open. The kind of guy who didn't yet know how people could break you. He'd probably never had to patch a broken exhaust pipe in the rain, or bury someone he loved too early. David turned away. "Dinner's on your own. I work late." Marco leaned against the counter. "Guess I'll have to learn how to cook for one. Unless..." He paused, eyes sparkling. "Unless you want to teach me sometime." David didn't even look back. "I'm not your project, kid." "Didn't say you were," Marco said softly, more to himself than anyone. As David grabbed his jacket and stepped back out into the fading afternoon light, he muttered under his breath, "This is a mistake." But as he walked toward the garage, he noticed the window in Marco's room was already open, a breeze fluttering the curtain. There was laughter in the air, distant, light. Something inside David's chest shifted. Just a little. He didn't want to admit it, but part of him was already listening for that sound again. Chapter 2. Oil Numbers. The smell of grease, metal, and gasoline was sacred to David. It grounded him, something familiar in a world that had changed too much. He wiped his hands on a rag, crouched beside the undercarriage of a pickup with a stubborn transmission. A good day was one where engines spoke clearer than people did. "Need a hand?" Marco's voice cut through the air. David flinched slightly and bumped his head against the frame. "Damn it, what the hell are you doing in here?" Marco stood at the edge of the garage holding 2 paper cups. "Peace offering," he said, raising one like a white flag. "Coffee. Black for you, oat latte for me. Also, this place is kind of amazing." David slid out from beneath the truck, eyeing Marco warily as he accepted the cup. "You don't belong in here." "Says who?" Marco asked, brushing sawdust off a nearby stool before sitting on it. "I took shop class in high school." David snorted. "Bet you broke a nail." "Only once," Marco grinned. "Twice, maybe." He watched David sip the coffee and leaned forward a little. "I really like it here. Your place, I mean. It feels lived in, like there's history." "There is," David said, simply grabbing a wrench. Marco's expression softened, but he didn't push. "You've got good hands," he said, watching David's fingers work the bolt loose. "Strong, steady." David didn't look up. "Marco." "What?" "It's a compliment." David stood abruptly. "You don't have to flirt with me just because you're bored." Marco blinked. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "You're 28. I'm 40. We're not. This isn't anything. So whatever this is, drop it." Marco's smile faltered. "You really think I care about the number?" David met his gaze. "You should." Silence. Marco took another sip of his coffee, then stood. "Well, I'll be in my room, doing my boring accountant things, with numbers that won't talk back." David turned back to the truck without replying. Marco's footsteps faded. But that night, when David went to grab a beer from the fridge, he noticed something taped to it, a note in Marco's handwriting. "FYI, you overpaid on last month's power bill. Already adjusted your half on my rent. Don't thank me, just don't strip a bolt tomorrow." David stared at it for a long moment, then cracked open the beer and muttered, "Smart ass." But he didn't take the note down. Chapter 3. Midnight Talks. The storm came in fast. Sharp winds, heavy rain, and a crack of lightning that knocked the power out just past 9 p.m. David cursed under his breath as the house went dark. He lit a flashlight from the junk drawer, its beam flickering, then went to check the fuse box. No dice. It wasn't just them. The entire block was out. By the time he returned to the kitchen, Marco had lit a few candles. The warm glow danced across his face, throwing soft light over cheekbones and curls. "Well, look at that," Marco said with a grin. "Romantic ambiance. All we need is wine and jazz." David rolled his eyes. "You always talk this much?" "Only when I'm nervous," Marco said honestly. "Or when I'm trying to get someone to loosen up." David leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm not wound up." Marco raised an eyebrow. "You're a walking coil, David." For a moment, David didn't reply. The silence settled, not awkward, but strangely comfortable. Marco slid to the floor with his back against the kitchen cabinets, motioning for David to join him. After a few seconds of hesitation, David did. They sat shoulder to shoulder in candlelight, the rain tapping softly on the roof above them. "I used to love storms," Marco said. "When I was a kid, I'd sneak out onto the porch just to feel the wind." David chuckled quietly. "And what, get struck by lightning?" "Almost once. I got lucky." "You're a reckless idiot." "Yeah," Marco smiled. "But I like the way the world feels different when the power's out. Like time slows down." David didn't answer. He stared ahead, jaw tight. Marco nudged him gently. "You ever talk about her?" David turned his head, surprised. "Your wife," Marco added softly. "Or whoever she was." David looked down at his hands. "No, not much to say." "Bullshit," Marco said, not unkindly. "There's always something." The air thickened with weight. David's voice, when it came, was low and brittle. "She died 5 years ago. Cancer. Took her fast. One day she had a cough, 6 months later she was gone." Marco didn't speak, he just listened. "I didn't know how to live without her," David continued. "Still don't some days. I kept working, kept fixing things. Figured if I could just keep fixing stuff, maybe I wouldn't break too." Marco placed a hand gently on David's forearm. "You didn't break." David didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. They sat there, the contact between them warm and steady. Marco spoke again, quieter now. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm not even asking for anything. I like being around you. Even if you act like a damn grizzly bear half the time." David let out a low laugh, the kind that hadn't come in years. The candle flickered, throwing soft gold across the floor. David didn't say anything else, but he didn't move away from Marco's hand either. And when Marco finally stood and offered him a hand up, David took it. Not because he needed help, but because in that moment he wanted to. Chapter 4. Mixed Signals. David noticed it first at breakfast. Marco didn't make coffee. No stupid smile, no witty remark about almond milk. Just silence, a travel mug in hand, and eyes focused on his phone. He offered a casual nod when David entered the kitchen, but didn't linger. David said nothing, but the silence echoed louder than any engine backfire. By day 3, David had had enough. "Something wrong?" he asked bluntly, wiping grease off his hands as Marco passed the garage. Marco paused. "Nope, all good." David squinted. "You sure? You've been quiet?" Marco smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't realize you cared." That hit harder than David expected. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marco leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "It means maybe I'm tired of being the one who always initiates, the one who flirts, the one who listens to your pain while pretending I don't feel anything myself." David shifted uncomfortably. "We had a moment. That's it." "Right," Marco nodded. "A moment. That's all it was to you." David opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He wanted to say something, that it meant more than he let on, that he wasn't ready, that he was scared as hell, but he didn't. Instead, he muttered, "Don't make this something it's not." Marco pushed off the wall, frustrated. "Maybe I didn't. Maybe you're the one pretending there's nothing there because you're afraid of what it might mean." And with that, he walked off, leaving the smell of oil and silence behind him. That night, David found himself staring at Marco's bedroom door. Light leaked from beneath it along with muffled music. Piano, something slow and aching. He raised a hand to knock, lowered it, walked away, but couldn't sleep. The next morning, Marco was gone before David woke up. A sticky note sat on the fridge. "Gone early, back late, don't wait up." No smiley face this time. David crumpled the note in his fist. Chapter 5. The Green-Eyed Monster. The door creaked open just past 10 p.m. David was on the couch, nursing a beer and watching reruns with the volume low. He hadn't meant to wait up, but he had. The second the front door opened, he muted the TV. Marco stepped in, cheeks flushed from the cold night air. Or maybe something else. He looked good. Too good. Slim-fit jeans, a charcoal sweater. Hair tousled just enough to suggest fingers had been in it. Maybe his, maybe someone else's. David's chest tightened. "Have a good night?" he asked, tone sharp even to his own ears. Marco blinked, surprised to see him up. "Yeah. Caught up with an old friend over drinks." "Friend, huh?" David set the bottle down harder than he intended. Marco narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," David said flatly. Marco scoffed. "You're unbelievable." "What?" "You don't get to act jealous, David. Not when you've made it clear I'm just some tenant who flirts too much." David stood slowly. "I never said that." "No, you just acted like it. Every damn time I tried to get close." "You don't know what the hell I'm dealing with," David growled. "Then try telling me instead of treating me like I'm some kid chasing a fantasy." The silence was deafening. Marco stepped back, his voice softer now. "You think I don't see it? The way you watch me when you think I'm not looking. The way you freeze up every time I say something real. You're not made of stone, David. You're just scared." David clenched his jaw. "I'm not scared." Marco met his eyes. "Then prove it." Another pause. Heavy. Tense. But David didn't move. He didn't speak. Marco let out a hollow laugh and shook his head. "Didn't think so." He turned and walked to his room, shutting the door firmly behind him. David stared at the closed door for a long time. The echo of Marco's words hung in the air like smoke. "You're not made of stone, David. You're just scared." He grabbed the beer, took a long drink, and whispered to the empty room. "Yeah, I am." Chapter 6. Cracks in the Armor. The house felt colder than usual. Marco had barely said a word in 2 days. No coffee, no shared jokes. Just silence, footsteps, and the sound of his bedroom door closing behind him. David had never been good at chasing people. He wasn't raised to talk about feelings. He was raised to fix things. But this couldn't be tightened with a wrench or patched with tape. Late that night, after pacing the hallway 3 times, David stopped outside Marco's door. He stared at the wood. knocked. No answer. "Marco," he said gruffly. "You awake?" A few seconds passed. Then the door creaked open. Marco stood there in an old t-shirt and pajama pants, looking tired and wary. "What?" David swallowed, suddenly unsure what the hell he came to say. I need to talk to you." Marco raised an eyebrow. "Now?" "Yeah, now." Marco stepped aside silently, and David walked in. The room smelled faintly of cologne and laundry detergent. Clean. Lived in. It made David feel out of place. Marco leaned against the desk. "Go ahead." David looked at him. Really looked. "You were right," he said quietly. "I've been pushing you away. Not because I don't feel something, because I do. I just didn't know how to handle it." Marco's eyes flickered. "Then why treat me like a joke?" "Because it's easier to pretend nothing's real than admit I want something again," David said. "Because if I admit it, it can be taken away." Marco didn't speak. He just watched. "I'm not good at this," David admitted. "I lost someone once and I swore I'd never let myself go there again. Then you moved in, and you made me laugh when I didn't want to. You listened when I didn't deserve it, and every time you looked at me like I mattered. It scared the hell out of me." A long beat. David sighed. "I don't want you to leave. I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel something. I don't know how to be with someone who makes me want again." Marco stepped forward, his voice soft. "You don't have to have it figured out right now, but you do have to stop running from it." David looked down, then back up at him. "I'm tired of running." And that was enough. Marco didn't kiss him. But he walked up and rested his forehead against David's chest. David froze, then slowly, cautiously, wrapped his arms around Marco. It was awkward, hesitant, but real. They stood like that for a long time, no words, just breathing. And for the first time in years, David didn't feel like something was broken. Chapter 7. Lines and Limits. For the first time in weeks, breakfast wasn't silent. David poured coffee while Marco quietly fried eggs. The tension that used to hang between them had changed, still there, but softer, no longer threatening to snap. Something had cracked open, and now neither of them quite knew what to do with it. David passed Marco a mug without speaking. Marco accepted it with a small smile. "You always make it too strong." David shrugged. "Then water it down." "Maybe I like it bitter," Marco muttered, then caught himself. "The coffee, I mean." David glanced at him. A corner of his mouth twitched. They sat at the table together for the first time in what felt like forever. Marco sipped his drink. "So, what now?" David frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what are we now? Are we dating? Are we figuring things out? Or was last night just an emotional release?" David looked at him, eyes steady. "It wasn't just a release." Marco let out a breath. "Good. Because I'm not good at casual. And I'm not interested in being your maybe or your experiment. I'm not asking you to be," David said quietly. Marco studied him. "Then what are you asking for?" David stared at the tabletop for a moment, gathering the words. "Time. Patience. A chance to figure out how to be. This version of me. The one that's not stuck in the past." Marco nodded slowly. "Okay, that's fair. But I need honesty, David. If you're scared, tell me. If you're hurting, let me in. I don't need promises. I just need the truth." David met his gaze. "You'll have it." The air between them changed, no longer filled with frustration, but with anticipation. Then Marco smirked. "One condition." David raised an eyebrow. "What?" "You take me out, like an actual date. Somewhere not the garage." David groaned. "God, that's so domestic." "Damn right," Marco grinned. "I want full effort, not just oil stains and grunts." David shook his head with a small smile. "Fine. Dinner tomorrow night. Wear a shirt that doesn't smell like engine grease. I make no promises." They chuckled together, the sound easy and light. Later, when David returned to the garage, something felt different. His chest didn't feel as heavy. The ghosts weren't gone, but for once they weren't winning. Chapter 8. The First Date. David stared at the mirror like it owed him answers. Button-down shirt, clean jeans, freshly shaved. He looked decent, presentable, like a man going on a date, which somehow terrified him more than any busted transmission ever had. When he walked into the living room, Marco looked up from the couch and smiled. "Damn," Marco said. "You clean up nice." David shrugged, tugging at his collar. "Feel like an idiot." "You look hot, stop fidgeting." David mumbled something about being too old for this, and Marco just laughed. "Come on, Romeo, your chariot awaits." They headed to a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. Not too fancy, not too loud. Just enough for soft music and dim lighting to do their job. They got a booth in the corner. David fidgeted with his menu until Marco reached over and gently pushed it down. "Relax," he said softly. "It's just me." David met his eyes and the moment lingered. They talked about music, about work, about Marco's annoying clients and David's stubborn customers. And slowly, David started to unwind. Until... "Why did you stop dating after your last relationship?" Marco asked gently. David stiffened. He looked away. "It wasn't just a breakup, it was a mess. I got scared, and I got used to being alone. It was easier." Marco nodded, thoughtful. "Do you still want to be alone?" David didn't answer right away. Then, "No, not anymore." Marco reached across the table, fingers brushing David's. The contact was brief, but David's chest thudded hard. His jaw clenched like a reflex. Like his body didn't know what to do with gentleness anymore. Marco noticed. "Still hard to let someone in?" David nodded. Marco offered a soft smile. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, they didn't rush home. They walked along the quiet street after dinner, hands occasionally brushing. And when they stopped at the front door of the house, David hesitated. Marco looked at him. "Invite me in." David's throat felt dry. "You live here." Marco stepped closer. "Then stop acting like I don't belong." David reached out, brushed Marco's cheek with his knuckles. The moment stretched, and then finally he leaned in. Their first kiss wasn't perfect. It was hesitant, tense, but real. And when Marco kissed him back, hands fisting into David's shirt, David let himself feel it. Messy, terrifying, electric. They pulled apart, breathless. David whispered, "You're trouble." Marco grinned. "You love it." Chapter 9. Give In. The door clicked shut behind them. They didn't move at first. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was charged, heavy, vibrating like the space before thunder. David stared at Marco, his breathing shallow and fast. He'd known fear, real, gut-wrenching fear. But this was something deeper, rawer. Want dressed up in vulnerability? This was Marco. And David wasn't sure what terrified him more, wanting him or letting himself be wanted back. Marco's voice broke the silence, soft but sure. "You okay?" David answered without words. He stepped forward, cupped Marco's jaw and kissed him, slower, surer, tasting the moment like he didn't want to forget a single second of it. Marco melted into it, pressing their bodies together, his hands sliding under David's shirt, skimming his back. When his fingers traced an old scar, David shivered, not from pain, but from the intimacy of it. Marco wasn't just touching skin. He was learning him. Clothes disappeared like they'd been waiting years to be shrugged off. Shirts pulled over heads, jeans pushed down impatiently, lips never parting for long. Each layer dropped to the floor with a soft thud, until they stood bare before each other, breathless and exposed. By the time they reached the bedroom, every inch of David's body ached, not from lust alone, but from the need to be touched like this meant something. He hesitated at the door, heart thundering. Marco, behind him, placed a hand on his hip. "We can stop." David looked back, eyes dark with desire. "I don't want to stop." He opened the door. The bedroom was dim, the light soft, the bed unmade, just like his thoughts. They fell into it together, mouths meeting again, bodies pressed tight. David lay back as Marco kissed his way down his chest, lips brushing each line of muscle, each quiet breath drawn sharp. When Marco's mouth wrapped around him, David gasped, his hips lifting off the mattress, fingers fisting the sheets. The warmth, the wetness, the rhythm. It was slow, teasing, maddening. Marco looked up at him as he moved, eyes locked with his, and something deep inside David fractured. He wasn't just being touched, he was being seen. David's moans turned to curses, then pleas. "Fuck! Marco!" He came hard, hips bucking, mouth open in a silent cry, Marco swallowing every drop with devotion. David collapsed back against the pillows, panting, chest slick with sweat, vision swimming. But Marco wasn't done. He crawled up David's body, kissing him again, hungry and deep, letting him taste himself on Marco's lips. David moaned into his mouth, pulling him close, needing more. Marco pressed inside him slowly, inch by inch, careful and reverent. David arched beneath him, wrapping his legs around Marco's waist, drawing him deeper. The stretch burned, but it was the kind that made him feel real, present. They moved together in rhythm, bodies rocking, sweat slick and breathless. Marco's name became a mantra on David's lips, over and over, between gasps and groans. It wasn't rough. It wasn't hurried. It was intimate, raw, grounding. Every thrust a vow David never knew he needed to hear. Marco's hand found his, fingers lacing, pinning them to the mattress. When Marco came, he buried his face in David's neck, shuddering, moaning his name like a confession. David held him through it, his other hand cupping the back of Marco's head like he was afraid to let go. They stayed like that, tangled and slick, in the silence after. Eventually Marco slid off. David pulled Marco into his chest. Their skins stuck where it touched, warm and wet, but neither moved. David stared at the ceiling like it held all the answers. Marco kissed his forehead. "Still scared?" David nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Marco smiled into his skin. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." Chapter 10. Something Like Home. Sunday mornings at David's place used to be silent. Now there was music playing from the kitchen, the scent of fresh coffee mixed with pancakes. Marco stood barefoot, flipping them with a ridiculous amount of focus, wearing nothing but boxers and one of David's old flannel shirts. David leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, just watching. "You're gonna burn those," he muttered. Marco glanced back, smirking. "Nah. Perfect golden brown, unlike your sad, undercooked excuses for breakfast." David rolled his eyes and walked in. "You keep talking like that, I'll start charging rent again," Marco grinned. "That implies I ever paid in the first place." David swatted his ass on the way past. "Thief." They sat down at the table. No big moment, just coffee, food, quiet smiles. After breakfast, David stood and walked to the small drawer under the stairs. He pulled out a key, a spare, old and dull, but still solid. He held it out. Marco blinked. "What's this?" David cleared his throat. "Your key, to the house." Marco stared. "I already live here." "Yeah," David said, "but this makes it official." Marco didn't take it right away. He just looked at David, eyes full. "You're really doing this?" "I'm done hiding," David said simply. "You're not just some temporary fix. You're the person I want to come home to, every day, even when you burn the pancakes." Marco laughed, took the key, and closed the distance between them with a kiss that said everything words couldn't. Later that day, they went into the garage. David cleared out an old workbench, dusted it off, and pointed. "Yours, for your tools, or paperwork, or whatever you accountants keep in toolboxes." Marco raised a brow. "You're giving me space in the holy temple," David smirked. "Figured if I'm making room in my life, I might as well make it everywhere." They stood there in the scent of oil and sunlight, the engine of their shared life just beginning to hum. And for the first time, David didn't feel like something was ending. He felt like something was finally